Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive systemic shift in how professional truth is stored, translated, and transmitted in the modern labor market. We're going to take a highly focused, structural look at the foundational architecture introduced in Jeff Chamberlain's 2026 book, What Comes After the Resume. Look, if you've been feeling this growing disconnect between your actual work history and the digital profiles that are supposed to represent you, you are not alone. This explainer is going to decode exactly why that's happening and, more importantly, how you can fix it. So let's kick things off by recognizing a pretty hard truth. The traditional resume has fundamentally collapsed under the weight of automated hiring systems. As Jeff Chamberlain defines in his foundational architecture, a resume is not the record, it is a rendering of the record. Think about that for a second. For decades, our professional lives have forced complex human judgment, nuanced constraints, and real operational context into these highly compressed, machine-readable fragments. We've literally been treating the resume as the ultimate source of truth, when in reality, it was only ever meant to be a surface-level summary. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the age of generated surfaces. Second, AI as the evidence layer. Third, the worker-owned evidence layer. Fourth, evidence versus exposure. And finally, number 5, rendering truth from source. Let's jump right into section 1, the age of generated surfaces, and explore this structural crisis. Under Chamberlain's framework, a generated professional surface is defined as a selected, compressed, or AI-generated rendering of your experience. Basically, think of your resume, your LinkedIn profile, or even an AI-generated bio. The core issue here is that these surfaces are incredibly easy to distort. You see, every surface has a specific purpose, and every purpose creates distortion simply by leaving things out. A resume distorts by compressing your whole career into a single page. An online application distorts by forcing your rich history into rigid platform fields. Ultimately, these surfaces are just outputs. Now, there is a hard, distinct line between a thin, platform-captured output and the deep, governed professional truth that you actually own. Consider the rendered surface for a moment. It's highly distorted, it's compressed, and it's fundamentally owned by platforms and algorithms. Contrast that with the governed source, which Chamberlain specifically identifies as the living professional record. This record is context-rich, it's anchored in real evidence, and it is strictly owned by you, the worker. The real danger in today's market kicks in when that rendered surface is mistakenly treated as the source itself. Moving on to section 2, AI as the evidence layer, focusing on institutional memory. We really have to stop viewing AI merely as a drafting tool, like a chatbot that just helps you rewrite a bullet point. The deeper structural issue is that artificial intelligence is mechanically extracting and standardizing your context way before a human decision maker ever even sees your materials. We spend a lot of time worrying about whether AI is making the final hiring decision, but actually the true risk is whether AI is shaping the evidence that justifies the decisions we still call human. Just look at how this operates at the enterprise level. As documented in corporate frameworks and vendor documentation, enterprise platforms like Workday Skills Cloud and LinkedIn Recruiter are actively filtering and flattening candidate data into standardized institutional memory. Workday literally extracts and infers your skills. Greenhouse and Bullhorn use AI to compress interview scorecards into quick, digestible summaries. The structural impact here is absolutely massive. These tools flatten the nuance of your work, your judgment, your constraints, the messy reality of the problems you actually solved into clean, generic paragraphs. The human recruiter ends up reading the summary, completely missing your deep context. So, what's the solution? That brings us to section 3, the worker-owned evidence layer, the structural antidote. This right here is the antidote. Chamberlain defines the living professional record as a private, durable, worker-controlled evidence base. And notice specifically what it preserves: source material, context, constraints, and human judgment. Now, to be clear, this is not a personal branding exercise. It's not a brag file. It is your private infrastructure for preserving context and evidence before organizational memory just completely disappears. It's a disciplined structure to carefully document what actually happened, the difficult decisions you had to make, and the real outcomes, existing entirely separate from any employer's HR system. Adopting this requires a major cognitive shift. Because if the only durable version of your professional contribution lives in an employer's Workday system or a recruiter's AI summary, well, you've completely lost agency over your own truth. You have to ask yourself, before an institutional system summarizes you, what exact evidence have you governed and preserved for yourself? Without your own record, you'll be forced to reconstruct your entire professional life purely from memory, usually under the intense pressure of a job transition, and that is a risky place to be. Let's turn to Section 4, Evidence versus Exposure. This is all about protecting boundaries. This brings us to a critical boundary where a lot of people make a fatal mistake in the age of AI. Building a private record does not mean hoarding confidential company data. Grounded in the NIST privacy framework and USPTO policies regarding trade secrets, your evidence layer must rigorously protect proprietary information. You absolutely have to navigate the serious, frankly toxic risks of uploading an employer's proprietary context into consumer AI tools like OpenAI, Anthropic, or Microsoft just to polish your resume. Similarly, you've got to remain fully compliant with EEOC directives as well as HIPAA and FERPA data protection standards. The core mantra here is this: evidence helps a person preserve truth, but exposure creates toxic risk. A mature, governed record travels privately. It allows you to truthfully translate your confidential, high-level work into public claims without ever copying sensitive files or violating enterprise data protections. Essentially, you're documenting your judgment and your impact, safely abstracted from the specific, classified data of your past employers. Finally, we reach Section 5, Rendering Truth from Source. Okay, here's how you practically apply the formal workflow of what Chamberlain calls AI provenance. Step 1, you start by preserving your source evidence privately. Step 2, you carefully select your surface and audience, say a LinkedIn bio versus a director-level resume. Step 3, you use AI, but strictly as a translation tool, making sure to document exactly what system you used and when. Most importantly, in Step 4, you meticulously review those AI-generated claims against your governed evidence to make sure the AI didn't inflate or flatten your actual work. And only then, Step 5, do you approve the final worker-owned surface. The AI suggests the language, but you govern the truth. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a crucial, slightly provocative question. When the entire labor market operates on records, who controls the record that the human is asked to trust? Will you allow an automated enterprise platform to compress and flatten your professional identity? Or will you build the governed source that tells the absolute truth? Ultimately, the choice of what comes after the resume is entirely yours.